I think a lot of people are starting to realize, wait a minute, like there is a better way and faster way to grow. And it takes a while for any company to really recognize that, because there is that nice, comforting, proven sales-led playbook that works. We know it works. We have the people and the skill set, and we can just make it work for now.
Taking a product-led approach can remove friction and improve customer experience. So what's the difference between product-led versus sales-led growth? What are some of the factors driving the shift to product-led growth models? And if you decide to go down that road yourself, what challenges and hurdles are in your way? To tackle all that and more, I talked with Wes Bush. He's the author of Product-Led Growth, the host of the Product-Led Summit, and the founder of the Product-Led Institute. My name is Ethan Beute. I'm the host of the Customer Experience Podcast and the host of the CX series here on B2B Growth. Here's my conversation with Wes Bush. Hey, today on the Customer Experience Podcast, we're going to address what's been a missing piece in the customer experience conversation here on the show to date. I think we're at episode 46 here, so we're finally getting around to something really important. We regularly talk with marketing, sales, and CS executives and practitioners. I've hosted speakers, authors, and consultants who specialize in things like branding, trust building, and even customer experience directly. But today, we're finally talking product, especially product at the intersection of sales and marketing. Our guest has years of experience in digital marketing and demand gen, but he spent the past 5 or 6 years going deep on product in particular. He's the founder of the Product-Led Institute. He's the author of Product-Led Growth, and he's the host of the Product-Led Summit. He's democratizing the way people are learning about this product-led movement. Wes Bush, welcome to the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I really appreciate, we're just warming up a minute ago, and I really appreciate what you're doing around these concepts of product-led. When I read the book, I felt like you were able to rope in what otherwise would have been disparate but super important ideas from people in a variety of seats. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for spending time with us here. I'm going to start where I normally start with the definition of customer experience. But before we do, you spent 4 years as the aquatic team leader for YMCA Canada. And I'm just guessing that something you learned in teaching kids to swim and running a team of people who taught kids to swim, what can that teach us about product experience or customer experience? Like, what did you learn then that you feel like is maybe still relevant today?
Wow. That's not a question I've had before. So in terms of that whole experience, I really do think that teaching is something that is so powerful whenever it comes to really just simplifying things. I really think if you want to understand something, you really need to learn how to teach it. And so I think whenever you're trying to think about customer experience, like if you're going to help someone, you really have to become a great teacher. And so I think that's a skill that, although I'm not teaching kids anymore swimming, that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
it's definitely something that I still try and hone in on that skill. And even with the Product-Led Summit or my book, I'm always trying to get better at teaching people and simplifying everything down so that other people can pick up things easier and become successful with whatever, whether it's knowledge or skills you're trying to transfer.
Love it. Great answer. And again, that, you've mastered something and were able to teach it well and turn other students into masters themselves. A great answer. And thanks for going all the way back there with me. I thought it might be a little bit fun as an opener. So let's ask the question that I ask everyone who is kind enough to spend time with me here. When I say customer experience, what comes to mind for you?
So when I think of like a really good customer experience, I think of two things. So the first thing is, whenever I'm looking at a company, or let's say I'm starting on the website, I am looking at their perceived value. This is everything the marketers talk about. This is what they're promising me. And then there's on the other side of that, which is once you're in the product or you actually get that product, if it's a physical product, there's the experienced value. So a good customer experience to me is where that perceived value, like what you're hoping you're going to get, and that experienced value really lines up, and it's just exactly what you expected, if not even better. So to me, customer experience is those two things. Is you got the perceived value, experience value, and it lines up with exactly what you expected.
I love it. And you did a really nice pass in the book on that topic, and especially about the gap that often exists and what we need to do to close that. For folks who aren't familiar, with the term product led, obviously it's something you've devoted your life to lately. Give folks especially in contrast to sales led growth, talk about product led growth. What is its definition? What are its primary characteristics?
Yeah, so I think to really understand product-led growth, it almost helps to take a step back and look at the traditional way of selling products. And for a lot of, especially software companies, the very traditional way was you have this demo process in place and you hire very expensive salespeople to sell your product. And the whole goal of these companies is really to take you from point A to point B in the sales cycle and then eventually become a customer. Whereas whenever it's a product-led company, it's really looking at seeing how can we show people the value of our product as soon as possible in the whole buying cycle. And so it does come back to that first part of my own belief about what customer experience is really just instead of telling people like, here's what our product is, here's what the perceived value is, what we're trying to do in a product-led company is actually show people by giving them the products, whether it's their free trial, freemium model, by making them successful and having them experience that value so that the value prop is experienced. It's not something we're just telling people. And so the reason why product-led companies are really taking off and growing faster than their sales-led counterparts really does come down to that. I mean, the best way to show, build trust is to really just show people like, here's our product, here's how we help you, go see for yourself. And so I think product-led growth in this whole movement isn't anything new. We've seen this in so many different categories. I mean, if you go to Costco or even try on cologne at the airport, like there is so many instances of free trials or getting samples of different things where once we do try them, we want to see more of it. And so I really think product-led growth, now that it's finally hit the software world, software companies are kind of saying, this works. This is a part of the buying cycle. We want to experience the product and see what it's all about. So that's what gets me really excited about product-led growth, also about customer experience.
Love it. The driving factors there, right? So it's kind of a go-to-market strategy. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think are some of the driving factors in that shift from the traditional, more sales-led model to this? I mean, you already got at some of it, which is people want this. People want that confidence. It's how we build trust. It's how we, in our own minds, we get rid of maybe some of that skepticism or remorse or confusion about is what I've been promised and what I'm expecting, what I'm actually going to experience. But from a cost standpoint, talk a little bit about some of the drivers in this shift from sales-led to product-led.
Yeah, so that's a really good point too. And one of the big tidal waves that's happening for any business, this isn't just specific to software businesses, but it's the fact that it's become so much easier to start a business. And so taken at face value, that seems like this amazing thing, which it is. I mean, I benefit from a lot of the same tools and everything else. It's never been easier to start a business, but at the same time, it's also become a lot harder to grow one. And so now that there's so many competitors for every single type of category and business, it's becoming a lot more expensive to grow. And so customer acquisition costs are actually becoming a lot higher. It's actually, according to a report by ProfitWell, is 55% they've increased in the last 5 years. And so that shows really no signs of stopping. So it's becoming a lot more expensive to get customers on board, but also customers are not as willing to pay as much for a lot of the same solutions as they were because software isn't as novel as it used to be. And so you have on one hand, rising customer acquisition costs. On the other hand, people are just not willing to pay as much for it. And so that leaves you in a really awkward position where you're saying, well, how do we get these people on board? Because they're not willing to pay as much and we can't actually spend as much. So either you have just smaller margins or you figure out a smarter way to sell. And so with the traditional sales-led way, you're hiring inside sales team often, you're hiring account executives, and it's really expensive to make that model work. It's effective, it can work, but it's becoming less and less effective. And those margins are getting smaller and smaller on those businesses, where with a product-led business, whenever you're looking at the numbers, well, if that free trial or that freemium model can actually onboard people and upgrade them on their own, and maybe, once they do become successful and they do experience the value prop, then yeah, absolutely, sales and everyone else in customer success can reach out and really help those people along. But the majority of the work has actually been done by the product. And so that's really cool. Whenever you look at the revenue per user of some of these companies, I mean, like there's Ahrefs, they're 40 million ARR, 40 people. That's crazy. And so
that's incredible.
Yeah. And the fact that they've been able to do that is actually possible because their product helps them do a lot of the heavy lifting on that onboarding front. So I think from a numbers perspective, it's fascinating to look at that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And you're echoing a couple previous guests on the podcast, David Cancel from Drift. We spent a lot of time talking about a couple of those key market dynamics that you just walked through. And more recently, Dan Tyre from HubSpot. He's a sales guy. So for those of you who are listening, if you like that theme, I have a couple more conversations on those. Just visit BombBomb.com/iTunes or /Spotify or /Google to go find it in your favorite player. Where do you think we are in terms of this shift? Do you think this is an inevitability, and you and the folks you're working with and talking to and educating and the movement you're creating, is this an inevitability? And if so, where are we in this shift from sales-led to product-led? Are we in the very, very early days? And folks that you mentioned, like Ahrefs, are they pioneers? Like, where are we in this big picture in your view?
So honestly, we're really early stage at this point. This movement is just starting. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize, wait a minute, like there is a better way and faster way to grow. And it takes a while for any company to really recognize that, because there is that nice, comforting, proven sales-led playbook that works. We know it works. We have the people and the skill set, and we can just make it work for now. But if you really want to build a long-term business, you're going to start having to ask yourself some hard questions about, is this the best go-to-market strategy for us for the next 10 years? What should we do about that? How can we help our customers become successful earlier on in the journey? And so I think for a lot of companies, it's at this point where they're starting to ask a lot of those questions, which is great. But it's going to take a lot more for people to really kind of make that shift and change their company and how they really do market, sell, support customers. And there's the whole spectrum. It's not just, let's put on a free trial on our website. You got to change your marketing, how you do that, your whole sales approach. And a lot of different team dynamics have to change too.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like it puts a much heavier ask, obviously, on the product itself. I think for years, as people were, let's say just go back 8 or 10 years ago, you build some software, you have the sales-led model. And I think, once you get someone closed/committed with a purchase, then you start to unbundle like some of the shortcomings. And, like we maybe knew on the sales side that the perceived experience wasn't going to be fully delivered. And, for some of the dynamics you mentioned, and even in your previous response, that's not really tolerated anymore. Our expectations have moved so far beyond that. I think you're exactly right. And I do think there is an inevitability to it as well. You mentioned a playbook, and I got to say the product-led growth book that you wrote was very well sourced and super approachable, insanely practical. I call it a practical guide to it with terms and frameworks, examples and how-tos. And it spans initial strategy. I'm speaking now to the listener, not just to you. I'm sure you know what's in the book, and hopefully you find this to be a fair and accurate kind of capture of it. But, it spans from initial strategy and because this is go-to-market strategy, all the way through specific execution, including pricing, including email and messaging ideas. It's just really, really useful. When you committed to write the book, and I understand why you would do it, I did similar in trying to advance this personal video movement. I thought a book would just help reach more people, and it's tangible. It maybe buys you a little bit more credibility when you're trying to get a stage that you might not have been able to get otherwise, et cetera. But specific to the reader, what did you hope, like if someone picks up, or when someone picks up product-led growth, what do you hope that they take away from it at a high level in terms of a customer experience of a book buyer and book reader?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And so I think for the book buyer, what I didn't want to do, like the first 6 chapters of the book are really just identifying like if this is even a good fit. Because I think with a lot of new innovations, there's a lot of talk and people just like to say, oh, let's jump on this bandwagon. And so I really want to make sure that people are taking an educated step in the right direction, actually vetting it, going through a lot of the questions with their executive team to see, is this a good fit for the business? And so that's what I really tried to do is if it is a good fit, great, read the best of the book. If it is not, then I hopefully have saved you hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars by not going down that path. So I think in that first 6 chapters, that's really what my whole goal was. And for those people that are pro product led, it's a good fit for their business. What I'm really hoping they're going to walk away with is really understanding the fundamentals, because that's the second part of the book, is really just understanding like, what are those main 3 things that you need to build a product led business. And I think if you get those right and really hone in on them, it's going to make all the difference for your entire business. And so that's really my whole goal, is understanding if it's a good fit for you. And if it is, how do you take it to the next level?
So for folks who it is a good fit for, what are some of the, you do some active consulting, you're in these companies. Of course, you brought your own experience, I think, which is what motivated you to go down this road, because you kept seeing the same problems over and over. So I think you're going to have some really good and useful ideas here. What are some of the biggest hurdles when an organization accepts and understands that this is a good fit for them? What are some of the implications or hurdles, like from a sales standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a CS standpoint, or even from a product and dev standpoint? Where do you see challenges and hurdles for companies that identify that this is a good fit for them?
Yeah, so I think the way you sell really has to change. And depending on how big the business is, that can be absolutely petrifying, because you're used to a certain sales motion in your business. And now you're saying, let's just give our product away for free for a little bit, or if it's a free trial or freemium, potentially all or part of it for free. And from a sales perspective, that's scary, because they have the demo goals and all their metrics are set up for this one side of the business. But then as soon as you introduce that free trial, you're going to see your conversion rate go skyrocket, and people love it. But then the sales team's looking at our demos aren't as much. And so there's this constant friction between the teams of pro product led and then sales led. Which one should you really take into consideration? So I think for bigger teams, that's one of the biggest problems that any founder or leader in that team is going to have to really go up against. And so if you don't have your leadership or even your board on board with this new direction, it's going to be really hard to pull it off if you are an established business. That's why often, if you are earlier on in your journey, it can be so much easier for you to really kind of flip the switch, become product led from not day one, but in your first few years once you do get that product market fit.
I think that's really, really important. This idea that, in a lot of cases, the people making decisions have only known it the sales-led way. And so this is, there's just a sell-in on the concept itself, which then is, we're not tooled and staffed for it. Our toolkit is designed for this function. And then, as you said, I forget whether you said petrified or another synonym of it just a minute ago. I can see that too, where it's like, but, we have $25 million that are all stacked on this particular approach. And we want to stack another 25 million next year. Are we going to only stack 12 and then this thing's going to happen over here? How I can see how it would be very problematic and challenging culturally, especially the bigger the organization is, the more decision makers there are in the process, and the more you have riding on it in a variety of different circumstances. You wrote in the book, it wasn't a huge passage, but it was one that was really interesting to me, because I've heard a number of folks on the guests on this podcast talk about it, this idea, and it's something that's potentially controversial. I don't see it as such myself, but not all customers are created equal. And I think your language around it was, if the Queen of England shows up at your place, you're not going to treat her the same way as you treat a buddy who shows up to watch the game on the television or something. Talk a little bit about the implications in the context of these ideas in this movement, this idea that not all customers are created equal. How do we need to be aware of that, and what are its implications?
Yeah. So that perfect example, if someone does come who's a perfect fit customer, why are we, especially when it comes to your product and how you even onboard them from the very beginning, why are you giving them the same experience as everyone else? And so that's often something I see a lot of companies do, where it's just this one size fits all kind of onboarding. And it's a shame, because there's some people who are a perfect fit, and now we're getting to click the I'm not a robot button and fill out all these forms and everything else. And it's with modern tools, we can actually tell sometimes before they even fill out that form, if they're a good fit. And so there's a lot of things we can do from a customer experience perspective that we can just expedite things for those people and really make sure that they have the best experience. And even if we just use even simple terms like lead scoring and figuring out, okay, like this is a perfect fit customer, let's reach out proactively and earlier and help them onboard them in a new way, or send them a video earlier on in the journey. Just show them like a welcome to our product experience. We're excited to have you, and actually personalize it. And so I think there's so many great things we can do earlier on in that journey to really goes back to that definition of the customer experience, like make that experience value just so much better than the perceived value that you really wow customers. And that is really what feeds the word of mouth marketing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really good. And you're exactly right. I mean, just thinking about, I'm not deep in marketing ops here at BombBomb, but to your point of before the form gets filled out, I know that we know who's a good fit customer because we have software that allows us to know, maybe recognize some key domains when they're visiting the site, not even necessarily engaging with a form. And we can run that against a variety of data tools that tell us what their tech stack looks like and whether or not BombBomb would plug into it well because they use Salesforce or they use Zendesk or they use Gmail or they use Outlook. And so you're exactly right. And I like this idea that we can, not only can, but should invest more in people who are potentially worth more. And for a hardcore dive on that, I had recently the author of the Customer Centricity Playbook. And it was really a financial conversation, but she made the same arguments. And just going back to, the cost pressures you talked about in the beginning, costs more to acquire, and yet competition so high that, potentially lifetime value is threatened because switching costs are so easy and low because there's so much competition. And the price expectation is lower. We need to really pay attention to the financial aspects of these things. So separately, you offered a number of very useful frameworks in the book, but because this one in particular, when I read it out, it sounded a heck of a lot like customer experience and brand experience the way I think about it. And you've already touched on it, but I think using the UCD framework, understand, communicate, deliver, if you could just walk that out a little bit, I think that'll make your initial response on the definition of customer experience even more tangible for people.
Definitely. And so those of you that don't know what the UCD framework stands for, is really just understanding your customer and understanding your value and communicating that to your customers and then delivering on it. So if you're going to build any business, I think this framework could apply. It's really, I built it for product-led businesses, but I apply it to my own and it works. And so the first part is just really understanding your value and your user. And so that's just number one. Like if you're not really focusing on that specific piece, you're going to be creating the wrong products. You're not going to know what to communicate with them and really how to even personalize that experience. And so one of the biggest things I see people really just not investing enough in is that first part. And that's really the whole foundation of building a great business, is understanding that value and how you can help people better. Whereas the second part is really how to communicate your value to people. And so how you do that, especially for software companies, there's a million different ways. There's obviously the text on your websites. There's also your pricing. And so I think whenever it comes to product-led businesses, it's actually a little trickier because the value that you're communicating is often tied to your customer acquisition model. And so what I call it is an arranged marriage between your pricing and your customer acquisition model. And so how it works is essentially, let's say you give away all your features and everything on your product for free. Like your customer acquisition model, it skyrockets. But your pricing and your revenue model, it tanks and you go out of business. So you got to find where's that happy medium? And so I think for a lot of businesses, I think you benefit from having a value metric, whether that's using email subscribers, if you're in the email kind of space, or even per video or something like that, to really kind of align your pricing with the value that someone gets from your product, so that whenever they do make that decision, if they should go ahead with it, they're only paying for what they're really getting out of the product. And then the last part is really just making sure that you deliver on that value. And so that to me is really where I kind of break down that whole perceived versus experience value and really how to eliminate the value gap. Like when people do sign up, they have this expectation, and did you meet it in the reality? And so a lot of companies, and the reason why product-led companies are taking off is because there's been so many companies where there's just a massive, like a crater of a value gap. And so the bigger that is, the harder it is going to be for you to convert people into happy paying customers. And so that's really the UCD framework at a high level. But I think the big part there is focus on understanding your customer and eliminate your value gap so that whatever you're communicating to people aligns with what you're delivering.
Yeah, so useful. As you were talking about that gap, I was thinking, okay, probably the bigger the gap when done poorly, we're often probably pouring people into a CS team to try to help, like, you said craters, like to try to like fill it up and raise people up like in this heavy manual lift way, when in fact, a great product experience can do a lot of that for you. You actually used the word that I wanted to go to next. I feel like one of the themes, obviously it's used explicitly throughout the book, but it's one of those words that's a little bit buzzy. And so I think there are a variety of definitions on it. Talk to me about what you think of when you think about personalization. I think that word gets thrown around a lot. I think it's kind of like value or authenticity. How do you think about personalization and its value and its importance in this context?
So in this context, the way I really love personalization and see it work best is really based on outcomes. So like if I go sign up for your product, like yes, it does video, but there's specific use cases. Am I going to use it to send it to prospects? Is this going to be used for marketing? And so the best personalization whenever it comes to your product really is focused around those core outcomes. And then what you can do within the product experience is if someone clicks on, let's say, I want to send videos to prospects, you're accelerating them to that part of the product that they actually care about. And you actually will help them create that first video to go out to one of their prospects, because that is an amazing customer experience. That is helping them do exactly what they signed up to do. And you're just helping them along. So personalization for me is really just making sure that your product, it helps people get to that point that they care about a lot quicker.
It's great. So you're a marketer who's kind of made this shift. I'd say product marketing, but it's so much bigger than that. But as a marketer who's made a transition in thought and focus on the product experience, what do you wish more marketers understood about the product function?
Yeah, so I think it's about time a lot of people start looking at the product as your marketing. Like the product is your marketing. And the more, or I guess the sooner you realize that, the more you can look at that product and say, how can you help me? Like as a marketer, there's a lot of ways your product can help you. And so I did mention a little bit earlier when going through the UCD framework, like your customer acquisition model, like if you, let's say, give away some of those features for free, that's marketing. And it's really helping power that part of your business to get more people incentivized to actually try out your product and see what some of those features can do to help them in their lives. So I think for any marketer who's trying to make that switch, just start asking yourself how that product can help you, because there is going to be a ton of ways that can help you.
It's good. The summit. I've been leaning on the book a lot because I read it somewhat recently. I just reread it. As I mentioned before we hit record, I always read with a pencil so I can go back through it and rip out notes and things. So that's all top of mind for me. But talk a little bit about the summit. You were kind enough to invite me in to offer some training as part of that. You invited people from a wide variety of companies and even a wide variety of functions within organizations. What were you trying to do with the summit? What's the state of it? Do you have another one coming? Talk a little bit about the summit.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for participating. That was awesome. And so for the product-led summit, the whole goal of it is really just to democratize what product-led growth is all about. So what I'm doing is really reaching out to SaaS operators who are actually doing the work, who are really great at what they're doing, and just asking them to share how they're doing it with other folks. And so that whole model, although it seems very simple, is really taking off because there's so many people who are realizing, there's other companies just like them who are building product-led businesses, and those are kind of their peers, and they want to see how they're doing it. And that is one of the best ways you can really learn is from someone who might be maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of your business, and you get to really dissect and just learn from those people and see how they're doing it. And so with the summit, that's really what I'm hoping to do with it, because product-led growth, it can be this crazy looking thing. Like it's a great way to grow your business, but how? And so that's really what I'm hoping to share through a lot of other experts at the summit and break it down.
Love it. So from what you've learned from these people and in your own experience, this is going to be kind of a medium-sized setup, so stay with me. You have a product and a dev team that are ideally joined at the hip. You have sales and marketing, which are ideally joined at the hip. You have CS that you hope is tied in to marketing and to sales pretty closely, and that there's good communication around all of them. If a company that's been operating somewhat traditionally is trying to reorganize or restructure, like, are there new roles that need to be created? Are there new cross-functional meetings that need to happen? From your experience and learning from all of these different people in a bunch of awesome companies, by the way, if you haven't looked at the summit, someone listening to this episode, I mean, Wes has rounded up people from tons of companies you've heard of, and then other companies that you maybe haven't, but have accomplished some really cool things. So through all of that learning, what would you recommend from an organizational or structural standpoint, or even a functional standpoint? What are some of the first steps as people are starting to move this way? What does it require to get going?
Yeah. And so that part really depends on kind of what stage you're at. And so if you are, let's say, just a manager at a big company, you really have to try and get your management on board. And that would be step one. But if you are, let's say, management and you are on board and you're trying to think about how you can make this work in your business, well, in that particular case, what I recommend is trying to set up a tiger team. So get some people, or like at least one person from the marketing team, one person from the sales team, engineering and support, and really just sit them down and try and think about how you can improve this whole product experience. And the reason I recommend getting people from a variety of different backgrounds throughout the company is because that's exactly what you need to build a great customer experience. It is not just, that onboarding or that product team that handles everything. It's like, no, everyone has that touch point with the customer. And so you need to make sure that everyone's aligned on why we're doing this and actually able to implement this. Because it's one thing, I mean, marketers can talk a lot, but whenever it comes to creating that product experience and actually rolling it out, you do need other people. So for that management, if you do want to have that product-led company and roll it out slowly, I would recommend building a tiger team.
I really appreciate that you took it there, because that alignment and the multiple voices into planning, strategizing, decision-making, and execution is so important, especially going forward, because we all see the product differently. We all see the customer differently based on our different seats in the house. We're a medium-sized company of about 150 different people. So it's still small enough that we can get everyone in one room and try to communicate things, but it's also big enough that, even in a healthy culture, it can get really, really siloed. And so breaking that down and getting multiple voices and perspectives in is so important. For me, just out of my own ignorance, Tiger, is Tiger an acronym? Is that like, what is captured in the term Tiger?
Yeah. So tigers can move quick and fast.
Okay.
So
there you go.
I think that's why it gets the tiger team, because
so it's like sometimes it might be called a growth team or something like that.
Yeah. And I find the more companies I work with, especially even at the scale you're at, a lot of the management definitely relies on a team that can move really quickly, and they have a breadth of skills and they can really focus on a lot of different things and at least test and vet these ideas quicker.
It's good. This has been awesome. I really, really appreciate what you're doing. I think in a previous email exchange we had, you mentioned that maybe a dozen of our team members are subscribed to some of the stuff that you're putting out.
More.
Yeah. And so we really appreciate what you're up to. And I think you're 100% looking forward. Again, just thinking about the themes that I read, that I've experienced in some of the web-based and email communication you put out, and the other conversations I've heard on the show. There's so many connective themes here. And so I wish you continued success doing that. But before I let you go, I got a few things for you. First, because relationships are our number one core value here on the show and at BombBomb, I love to give you the chance to thank or mention someone who's had a positive impact on your life or career, and give a mention to a company or more that you feel is really delivering for you a great experience as a customer.
Okay, so I'll start with the amazing customer experience. So right now I'm reading the Everything book, and which is all about Amazon. And so I really like the inside scoop on just how Amazon really approaches their whole customer experience. And so the one thing that I thought a lot of companies don't think about that I love that they're focusing on is the fact that they're trying to focus on how they can charge less for everything that they offer, where I think a lot of companies are always on the other end of that and trying to think about how we can just charge as much as possible. And whenever it comes to product-led businesses, I see a lot of them trying to democratize just how to do some of these tools and really get people on board. Even I was talking to the CEO of Hotjar, and that was one of the things. It was really expensive to create heat maps earlier on. And so they made sure that people could get this amazing tool at a fair price. And so I really respect a lot of businesses that are prioritizing that and making sure that they can create an accessible product for the masses and help a ton of people get a lot of value.
That's a really, really interesting dynamic. I think it reminds me of, so I came up in broadcast television, running marketing teams inside like local TV stations. And I would say for viewership, like flat is the new up. If we could have the same number of viewers for a given show or at a given time as we did the year before, like we win. It's so interesting. I feel like so much of the dynamic you're talking about here, people are trying to hold on to the price point that they have while there's so much momentum and inertia toward cheap/free. And there are a lot of dynamics at play, and you already were clever enough to introduce those early on in our conversation here. How about a person who's really affected the way you view the world or the work that you do, or really propped you up at a time that you needed it?
All right. So this one goes back to one of the core values for myself is leave everything better than the way you found it. And so that is one thing that I've tried to live my whole life by. And that comes from my grandpa. So power to him.
That's excellent. That stewardship sensibility and approach, whether it's to your work, whether it's to another person's life, whether it's to any aspect of the lives we lead, it's such good wisdom. And I hope folks write that down or take it to heart. We do need to leave things better than we found them. You left this show better than you found it. I appreciate your time so much. If people want to go deeper on any of the things that we talk about, what are a few ways to catch up with you or some of the events or the book or et cetera? How can people follow up on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So regardless if you want to find out more about the book, what my business is up to, or the Product-Led Summit, just head on over to productled.com.
Awesome. Easy enough. Was that domain just available?
Nope.
Okay. I didn't think so, but at the same time, it is really, really early. Productled.com, Wes Bush. Thank you so much for your time here on the Customer Experience Podcast. I appreciate you and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much.
One of the questions that I end every conversation with is what company is delivering a great experience for you as a customer? And Wes went where other guests have gone before, which is Amazon. Ease, speed, convenience, and I guess in one word, frictionless. If you want to hear more conversations about how to create and deliver a better experience for your customers, whether product-led, sales-led, or some other form of growth, check out the Customer Experience Podcast in your preferred player, the Customer Experience Podcast. My name is Ethan Beute. I host the Customer Experience Podcast, and I thank you for listening to the B2B Growth Show.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.